friend, welcome to Ask Dr. Betters. I'm Danielle, and I'm here with my granddad, Dr. Chuck F. Betters. Granddad, the question we have for you today is what does the Bible say about grief and mourning?
Well, that's a broad question, but let me start off by saying this. The entire Bible is about grief. The entire Bible is about the difference between life and death. The Bible opens with creation, and no sooner is God calling creation good than we have our first murder, where Adam and Eve's kids, one of them, Cain, kills his brother, Abel. And yet the rest of the Bible is basically a commentary on the difference between life and death. The Bible ends in victory. It ends with a renewed garden where God creates out of nothing a brand new heaven and a brand new earth. Now we have to be very careful when we start talking about grief, because just as there are billions of people on the earth and billions of people have lived and died, and billions of people have experienced grief and sorrow, no two of them have grieved the same way. Grief is that unique. It's unique to every individual. So the question is, what does the Bible have to say about grief and sorrow? We have an entire book dedicated to the answer to that question. The book of Job is the oldest of all the Bible books. All 66 books have their beginning and their end. There is none older than the book of Job. Some have argued that it is even the first book of the Bible, even before Genesis. We don't know that for sure, but we do know that Job is about suffering. It's about taking one man in his personal struggle with pain and sorrow and exclaiming his story and explaining his story. Job begins this way. There's a cosmic scene at somewhere before Job was written. There's a cosmic scene in which Satan and God have entered into a debate about the capabilities of Job. Satan says to God, "You have a hedge around him. If you remove that hedge of protection, he will curse you." So God says, "Satan, go for it." Takes down the hedge of protection and gives Satan access to every aspect of Job's life, except one: his relationship to God. So Job proceeds to be attacked on every side. Satan unpacks and uncoils a true arsenal of pain and heartache and grief and sorrow upon Job. One thing after another. He loses his children, 10 of them. He loses his possessions. He loses even the faithfulness of his wife. He loses his health. He loses. Then enter his friends, people that should have known better. He loses them. They sit with him in silence, watching, perhaps in sorrow, the grief this man was going through. And they don't open their mouths until at one point in Scripture, they begin to do the unthinkable. they begin to talk. And they begin to talk about why these things are happening to Job. And Job's friends become his comforters. And I mean that facetiously, just as the Bible means it facetiously. They begin to comfort him in uncomfortable ways. They begin to speak to him, but in the wrong ways, with the wrong truth. Job, you're going through this because of sin in your life. Well, that's true of all of us. Sin in our lives is the result of the fall. We all live in the context of the fall. So we will all experience death. Personally, practically, environmentally, we will experience death. So after recounting one story after another, we tend to forget what was said at the beginning. Job says to God, take down the hedge. God says, go for it. And there's this cosmic battle between God and Satan going on behind the scenes. Job doesn't know it. The people around him don't know it. But it is a battle over his soul. And the one aspect that Satan was not given permission to touch was Job's relationship with God. Brings us to the heartbeat, to the answer to this question, Danielle. It brings us to the centerpiece of the entire book of Job, which is a book about grief and sorrow. It comes in Job chapter 13 and verse 15. Let me read it to you carefully. Job 13:15 says this. Job is speaking. He says, though he slay me, that's God, I will hope in him. I will trust him. Even if he kills me, even if I die under the scourge of this vicious assault, though God slays him, I will put my hope and my trust in him. Now that's wonderful. We look at that and we say, I hope I am like Job in that regard. That I will trust God no matter what my grief looks like. But the verse doesn't end there. He goes on and says, yet, though I trust him, yet I will argue my ways to his face. Here Job is giving himself permission to argue, to question, to beat on God's chest, to say to God, this grief is unbearable. This sorrow is beyond any pain that any human being could ever know. And even though God may end up killing me or taking my life, I will hope in him, but I will argue my ways. I will ask questions. I will grieve in my way. God created us that way. Each man, each woman grieves differently. That is why it's so important that you never say to a grieving person, you shouldn't feel that way. Or why are you still grieving? I had people tell me after I lost my son, Mark, was Mark a Christian? I say, yes, he knew the Lord. Well, where is he now? They would ask. Well, he's in glory with God. He's in the presence of Jesus. Well, then why are you grieving? They would ask. At that point, you want to slap somebody. You want to hurt somebody because they don't get it. Each person grieves and mourns differently. And we have to give them room and license to do so. That's why it's very important that we not say stupid things to a grieving person, because each one is unique in their grief. They had a unique relationship with their deceased loved one. They had a unique set of environmental circumstances that give rise to different forms or shapes of grief. No two people grieve the same way. But here's the concept. Even if God slays me, I will trust him. I will hope in him. What other hope do we have? Where else can we turn? The disciples would ask, to whom shall we turn? You have the words of life. So we turn to Jesus. In our grief, in our sorrow, we raise the questions we need to raise. We raise the objections, the whys, the wherefores, because he can take it. No one else can. We can lean on him because he tells us, come to me if you are laboring, if you are heavy with sorrow, I will give you rest. Who else is going to give it to us? No matter how much we tried, we were two wounded soldiers, my wife and I, when we lost our son, trying to drag each other off the battlefield, wounded and bloodied. But there was only one hope. Though he slay me, yet will I hope in him. So what does the Bible have to say about grief? That's it. Though he slay me, yet will I trust in him. Yet I will complain to him of my ways. I will share with him my heart, my sorrow, my questions, my doubts, my fears. Because, friend, he can take it. I hope this helps you to understand the meaning of the word grief. Visit us at MARKINC.org to find out everything that's going on with our ministry. May God bless.